Next up, we have Nathan Gorton, Eddie Chang, and Cheryl O'Brien to join us. And everyone, just as a heads up, I think we have a good amount of time, but brief comments. So we have a lot of people signed in that want to testify on this fantastic piece of legislation. So just a warning.
Great, perfect. Good afternoon, Chair Peterson and committee. Nathan Gorton here, testifying on behalf of Washington Realtors, here with two members of the WR leadership team. Washington Realtors represents nearly 24,000 realtors statewide, and we are happy to be here in support of this bill. According to the Federal Reserve, today the net worth of homeowners nationwide is 40 times that of a renter. Both nationwide and here in Washington, many industries were either complicit or actively pushed local governments to deny Black and minority families the American dream of home ownership and the financial security that brings. Practices such as redlining and racial covenants are a sad part of our state's history and a sad part of the history of the industry that I represent. Washington Realtors was proud to be a leader on the bill in 2021 that notified families of racial covenants on their title and the simple process to redact that language. Washington Realtors views this bill as the next step in the process. Some on this committee may be aware that Washington Realtors in the past has not always loved the idea of increasing the document recording fee, but we are here today in support of both this program and the fee increase, and we ask you all to pass this bill out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Cheryl O'Brien. I'm the current Vice President of Government Affairs for Washington Realtors. I have been a realtor for over 30 years with John L. Scott. And I would just hope everybody in this room believes in the American dream and what it can do for people. With 30 years as a realtor, I've had the privilege to help hundreds of people own homes. But I can tell you from experience, it's been far more of a challenge for people of color and minorities to make that dream come true. History has told us the obstacles. And this bill, 1474, gives us one more tool to alleviate those challenges. Washington Realtors has long opposed any increase to the document recording fees. But if this can bring some light and joy and generational wealth that home ownership brings to families, this is more than worth the price. We ask that you promote this.
Thank you. My name is Eddie Chang. I'm the VP-elect of Government Affairs for Washington Realtors. Coming from the Asian community, I know the general outlook of the Asian community is what you see in Crazy Rich Asians. But the Chinese have been in the Washington state before even the territory became a state. They built the railroads, they built the shipping lines, they were the coal miners, all the way until 1882, where the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed. Part of the state constitution in 1989 prohibited resident aliens who were the Chinese miners and work folk here from becoming citizens, which then the state constitution barred them from owning any property. In 1921 and 1922, the Washington State legislature passed a bill that further restricted resident aliens from even leasing property. This is a history that has extended a long, long time. In 1927, the Filipinos were expelled from Yakima Valley. In World War II, during Executive Order 9066, the Japanese were rounded up Japanese in Bellevue, and the strawberry farms were rounded up and taken away to internment camps. A lot of the residents there, including a lot of the owners there, ended up having to sell and liquidate everything really cheaply because they didn't know if or when they would be able to return to Washington State. So speaking as a Chinese person, I urge the committee to support this bill, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions for friends in the real estate business, our realtors? No. Thank you again for coming forward. Next, let's bring up staff. Jasmine Jefferson.
Hello. Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Welcome.
Excellent. Jasmine Jefferson, Realtor, testifying on behalf of Washington Realtors, Western Washington Realtists, the Black Home Initiative, and as a designated broker owner of a real estate firm in Lakewood. I have a couple of stories to share that will further highlight what you've been hearing here today. As a new broker in the early 2000s, I found myself in an industry I knew nothing about other than that this was an opportunity for me to change my narrative. I read every document that came across my desk, including title reports with restrictive racial covenants that at one time barred a person like myself from living or owning a home in certain areas. Even though there was language added that prohibited any illegal practices from being enforced, it didn't change the fact of what I was reading, and it was jarring. These homes were in Tacoma and Lakewood. Years ago, I worked with a family whose home I listed for sale in North Tacoma. Reading the title report, I saw this home had been in the family for 60 years at a time when Black people were not permitted to live in this area. I learned that in order for the family to own here, they had to have a person passing as white assist with the process of purchasing. Had this home closed in the Hilltop neighborhood of Tacoma, it would have sold for approximately $300,000 less than what it did. Now I want to tell you about a decorated soldier, survived 4 tours and landed in Fort Lewis to retire Master Sergeant, nearly unheard of at the time. He went on to build a second career and became one of the first Black Boeing employees to earn the same wage as his white machinist counterparts. Wester Bradley Jefferson, son to Darthula and Thomas Jefferson, both who were born as children to ancestors held as chattel slaves, Tom, Liza, Sam, and Harriet. Wester is my grandfather. He was not given the opportunity to use his GI Bill, and he was not given the option to purchase a home in a neighborhood of his white counterparts. Instead, in 1963, he built a home in an all-Black part of town in what is now Tacoma's East Side Cloverdale neighborhood. I now lovingly own this home, and today it would fetch approximately $200,000 or more in equity in a different neighborhood a couple miles north. Now is the time for us to do the right thing. The organizations I'm here speaking on behalf of all view this bill as the next step in this process of correcting harmful, dehumanizing laws and practices. We are here today in support of both this program and the fee increase, and we ask you all to pass this bill out of committee. My ask is personal, and so is this work. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share these stories with you today.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Nicole Bascom.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Nicole Bascom Green. I am the owner and designated broker of Bascom Real Estate Group, which is a family-owned brokerage that my father started, Paul Bascom, in the Central District of Seattle in 1982. I'm also the president of the Western Washington Realtors Board of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. We are the real estate trade organization that started in 1947 when my colleagues back then who were real estate professionals were summarily shut out of the real estate industry. So for 75 years, we have been promoting democracy in housing as realtors. So we have been at the forefront of this work. I also come to you as a board member of the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. I am a commissioner on the board and very connected to this work. As a real estate professional, we serve as gatekeepers, as real estate brokers, to homeownership for our clients and community. And this opportunity to create the access to additional down payment resources that are so vitally important here on the ground is there aren't words to describe how important this is. This document fee, which is really minuscule and compared to the other fees around closing, the excise taxes, way more expensive than what this document fee would be. But the incremental change it would make in our community is, I don't think that we really have the numbers to support what that could look like, particularly for people like me. I am a Washingtonian, born and raised. My family's been here since 1921, over 100 years. We lived in born and raised our families in the Central District, which no longer exists, by the way. The community I grew up in as a young woman is no longer in existence for state-sponsored activity, just like these title covenants. These covenants were state-sponsored activity. And I want to read to you the covenant that covered my community that I grew up in, that was very specific and very focused on shutting specific communities out. And it reads as such: the parties hereto signing and executing this instrument and the several like instruments related to their several properties in said district hereby mutually covenant, promise, and agree each with the others, and for their respective heirs and assigns, that no part of said lands owned by them as described following their signature to this instrument shall never be used, occupied by or sold, conveyed, leased, rented, or given to Negroes or any person of the Negro blood. So this state-sponsored wording was very specific in shutting out my ancestors and shutting out my family members and ensuring that if we were to be able to be homeowners, we were locked into a certain space. Redlining was real. I grew up in redlining. I am just one generation from that. And it is very clear that the government was clear about who they wanted to shut out. So now we need to be clear about who we need to include. Those of us who are ancestors of the enslaved have a specific stake in this and have been harmed specifically. And so we need wording and we need legislature that is specific to correct the Negro race, the Black race, particularly in this state. So I ask you, committee, to hear the testimony of all of us who are here to support this act, that you push it out of committee and that we make change the narrative that we see across this country, but here in Washington. I believe we can be a beacon of change and start a revolution around really getting behind specificity with homeownership and being clear and concise and not just saying, you know, people of color, non-white, but being very clear that my community was specifically and purposely harmed in these acts and continue to do so. So I thank you for your time and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you very much for your testimony.